But welcome. We have a few more who have signed up. If they straggle in, that's quite all right. But I'm Don Rhoten, and I'll be talking about fundraising. Just a little background on myself, just so you have a little credibility to what I'm talking about. Certified fundraising executive, and I have a master's in strategic fundraising and philanthropy. So fundraising for 12 years, pretty big passion of mine. So before I start talking, and I'm just going to take a seat so we can have a conversation. Before I start talking, I want to learn about what brings you here so that I can kind of relate to what each of you are doing. So just real quickly, if you don't mind.
I have a 501c3. I put the dog park in Client Lake.
Right.
I'm always in need of money.
Yeah.
Without a question. I have a unique situation. I have a nonprofit and a profit at the same place.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm always looking for is ways to make money, and I was using a lot of information. I used to get information, or I was trying to get information and get some help through some grants. But 10 years ago they went down the crapper, and there's not many grants out there right now. And then if you find them, you got to find someone who can write them.
Right.
And there isn't anybody that I know that's good at doing that. I know one person that might be good at it.
Yeah.
So my hands are tied as far as generating enough money, and it's tough with employees and payroll taxes. It's a constant battle.
Absolutely.
We're bankruptcy on constantly.
Yeah.
Just saying, can you make it? And you need to make more money.
My littlest fans have just arrived. Yeah, so grants are obviously a huge source of funding, but tonight I'm not really going to talk about grants particularly. I'll talk more broadly about fundraising and hopefully give you some concrete things you can walk away with.
I'm
John?
Hartnett. I'm here because I'm on the board of Not One More. It's an advocacy group for addicts and their family members. Pretty much we need to raise funds to distribute low-cost Narcan or free Narcan to families that have an addict.
Isn't there currently an open prescription on Narcan?
There is.
But you just have to pay for it still.
Yeah, you have to pay for it, but it's really not that expensive. I actually was proposed to them that we do it like pay what you can,
Right.
So that we could continually have like Narcan on hand. But we also do like a support group tonight,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd like to get into some like issue advocacy where we can and stuff like that.
Great. Autumn, you're involved with everything, but what in particular?
I'm involved with a lot. I just came from the second Saturday community market meeting, so I came from that.
Great. All right, so no PowerPoint tonight, but I really want to make it an open conversation. So at any point, ask me questions, just stop me. I really want to provide as much value to each of you as I can. So let's start with the understanding that for this conversation, this topic where there would be a PowerPoint if there was one, for it to work, we have to work on the premise that we all know how to fundraise, which is pretty counterintuitive, right? But there's only one way to fundraise, to raise money, and does anybody know how that is? Cannot do it without doing this.
Solicitation?
Asking for money, right? Yeah, so the number one reason why people give is because they're asked. If you don't ask, you're not going to get any money. Point blank, period. You're going to get told no, you're going to get told yes, you're going to get asked why. Great. Those are all expected responses, but if you don't ask, you're not going to get any money. So the first thing that we have to just accept is that to raise money, you have to ask. There's a lot of issues with that for some people. They're not comfortable asking for money. They're worried about it. I think their perception of how the person they're asking is kind of a concern for them. They don't want to be perceived as somebody who's asking for money. I don't get that. I've done it it's my career, so it's kind of something I've, I guess, become accustomed to. But when we're asking, there's three things that we really need to take into account here, and they're three pretty big things, but we're going to kind of broadly discuss them. So as I go through them, ask me questions, because this is where the work will take place. So why are we asking? How are we asking? And who are we asking? Three things that we have to always consider in any sort of fundraising plan, any sort of fundraising strategy. Why are we asking? Let's talk about why are we asking first. So our case, the mission that we're supporting, the whole reason we exist is our why. So we have to be able to define clearly why. It has to be compelling. It has to make an impact. So we can't just ask for money and be raising money. That doesn't make any sense. So we have to define our why, and it has to be a clear case for support. A case for support can be another whole conversation in itself, but essentially it clearly defines that why we're raising money, why we're asking for money. I guess you should say not why we're raising it, but why we're asking. That can be built out over a long, exhaustive process, or it can be as simple as your mission statement. I would never recommend that it just be a mission statement. It should always be expanded upon that, but a case is really important. So the who. We can't just ask anybody. We can, but we all have limited time. We all have limited resources. We have to make sure that we're asking the right people and the people who are going to be interested. So if I did have a PowerPoint, you'd be looking at Rousseau's concentric circles. Rousseau's concentric circles. You can Google it. Fundraising concentric circles. It'll pop it up, and it'll show you I don't know what the name of the diagram is. Essentially, though, it shows you your key stakeholders, and you work from the inside out who your key stakeholders are. You don't want to ask a 3 and a 5-year-old for money for your cause because, well, they're not interested and they're not going to have any money for you. But you do want to ask your closest stakeholders. So your board members, your employees, your users, your volunteers. Those are all the people who clearly have a vested interest in your cause. So those are the ones you focus on. And the last one is how. And how is pretty straightforward. There's a lot of thought given to the how we're asking for money. Is it impersonal? Are we doing some type of like advertising or whatever? No, not at all. It's a direct, personal ask. If you want it to be successful, you have to ask the person directly. It has to be compassionate. It has to be face-to-face, ideally, especially initially when you're starting. But it has to be personal, and it has to be genuine. So at the foundation, I didn't say actually what I did I? So president of the foundation of the hospital, I do ask people face-to-face for money for different services that we offer, whatever it may be. But we have a big annual campaign. So we mail thousands and thousands of letters every year to donors and asking them for money. Everybody who we mail to has had a history with the hospital. They all have given in the past. They've all expressed an interest to support our mission. So it's personal, it's direct, it's just not face-to-face. Ideally, I could ask thousands of people face-to-face for money. You just can't do it. You don't have resources to do it. So we mail out an annual campaign, an annual fund campaign. Initially, starting off, though, at a smaller nonprofit, a smaller charity, it would all be face-to-face. You'd build your inner circle, and then you'd expand out from there. A word about that is I'm paid by the hospital to work for the foundation. So I'm not paid, it's a little unique. I'm not paid by the foundation. I'm actually paid by the hospital. But when I ask for money, I'm asking as a paid employee. Ideally, it's a volunteer, it's the board member, it's the user who's asking for the money, not a paid employee. Peer-to-peer requests are always far more successful than paid employee donor. Now, over time, you build up rapport with the individual, you build up that relationship, and it's no longer that feeling, well, you're just asking me because you're paid to. Not to say that it can't work. It obviously works really well, but it's always just better if it can be peer-to-peer.
Do you expect your board members, or are there organizations where you expect board members to be involved in the money raising and actually asking for money?
Yeah, so
Is that like a requirement? I mean, like a requirement for a board member?
Depends on the.
Ask for money.
Yeah, it depends on the organization. Some do require it, some don't. At our foundation, we have expectations. So every board member on the foundation board of the hospital has signed an agreement that says what their expectations are. It does not say that they will directly ask for money. It says that they will play a role in that process and that they will personally make a donation. I serve on a variety of boards, a variety of nonprofits, and before I ever say yes to serving on a board, I ask them if they have that list of expectations. If they don't, then either won't serve on the board or we'll get that introduced. Because it just doesn't make sense to ask. We all have limited time, and to get onto an organization that you're not sure what you're going to do, it's just not a valuable use of your time. So that expectations is it's not cumbersome. It doesn't say a lot, but it would define all of those types of things. Boards can have different committees, and so at the foundation we have a stewardship committee, which is kind of a recognition, thank yous, making sure the money is being followed through on, and I'll touch on that a little bit. We have a kind of a governance committee, and then a community engagement committee. There could be, in theory, a fourth committee, which would be for fundraising, where they would actually go out and ask. Now, new startup nonprofits, almost the board has to play a role in fundraising, has to be asking, has to be giving names of people who could be of interest, has to bring in their friends, and the idea is you're building out your circles to make that user group or your group much larger than what it initially was. So, to make a long answer longer, yes and no. This depends. Why, who, and how. Sorry, 3 things. Why, who, and how. Any questions on those particular areas? So the idea here is, you have to ask, and you have to have your cause at heart. It has to be clear. You have to be asking the right people, and it has to be done in a personal, direct, as personally and as direct as it possibly can be done. Makes sense? So I went to, let me give you some examples of where I have failed and where I've succeeded. So you get asked to be on nonprofit, especially as a fundraiser. you could ask to be on every nonprofit, I think, because they expect you just to raise the money for them, which has never been successful. I've never succeeded at any board where I was brought on as somebody, as a fundraiser who was going to help raise money or to raise the money. It just never works because I was never into that mission. It was never personal for me. Now, I raised a few $100,000 for a group in Haiti because I went to Haiti and I was there, and it just impacted me so much that I came back and I could have told everybody in this room about my trip to Haiti, and I would bet that almost all of you would at least consider making a donation because of the stories and because of what it was. Some people just they don't want to give abroad, so that's going to be a big turnoff. But it's all about your connection with the mission, your connection with the cause, and how you can deliver that message. So you're not only selling the cause, but you're selling your tie to it. So next, you get this kind of this plan together of who you're going to ask, how you're going to ask, and why you're asking. And then that's where a lot of people, a lot of nonprofits fail miserably. They think, all right, I've raised money, so I'm being successful. And that's where you lose your future revenue. That's where everything falls apart. If that's where you find success, that's where you're going to fail. You can't just raise money and sit back. You have to be a good steward of that money, and you have to be ethical with the money. Ethics above all else is critical as a fundraiser. Otherwise, well, we don't need to get into the value of ethics, but you should just stop what you're doing because it's not going to go anywhere. Being a good steward. Now, stewardship is really, really important to me. Over the foundation is 25 years old. We've had 4,500 donors. On an annual basis, we'll have anywhere between 450 to 550 donors. And every one of them, doesn't matter how much they give, $1, 1,000, 10,000, whatever it is, the fact that they're giving their money to your cause is paramount. It doesn't matter how much you're giving. To me, it's that somebody will give of their finances, and if they give, that's pretty special. So you can't just take that money and pat yourself on the back, because that's just where the job starts. Now you have to deliver on what you've asked of them, what they've entrusted in you with themselves, financially, volunteering, whatever it may be. So thanking them. We just started a nice effort. Some of our board members wanted to get more involved, and they now will write handwritten little notes to every donor thanking them for their gift. They wanted to do it. I thought it was a fantastic idea. I thought it was really great. So they write a handwritten note to everybody who gives. We have a nice annual event where every donor, again, doesn't matter how much you've given, is invited. We just thank them and give them a little gift, which is great. But more importantly, we guarantee that every person who gives, and we're unique in this. I mentioned before, I'm paid by the hospital. I'm not paid by the foundation. So we guarantee, and at any time somebody can ask for this information, and we'll provide it, that every dollar somebody gives to the foundation will be used exactly as they want. 100% of the money will be used exactly as they want. We're going to manage it. We're going to hold it. We're going to trust. We're going to make sure that it's safe. And then whenever it's time, whenever there's a need for it, we'll make sure that it gets placed and used appropriately. We will not take overhead, and not that I'm actually a proponent of overhead. A lot of times people get all upset that overhead is this horrible thing, but look, small nonprofits have to have overhead in order to stay alive. So it's not this horrible thing. We're just really fortunate that we don't have it. So it's beyond a promise of mine and of everybody associated with our foundation that every donation will be perfectly used and protected. We're not going to in any way waver on that. That's what makes our fundraising program pretty successful. We have a rule that within 48 hours of receiving every donation, a thank you is submitted at least through a letter, and phone calls are given as often as we possibly can. Sometimes we can't do it in 48 hours. Sometimes we can't make phone calls at all. But no matter what, a letter is given within 48 hours because that's, quite frankly, the least you can do. There are benchmarks for once a gift hits certain thresholds, you have to legally do more things. There are different criteria. If you start taking in-kind donations, real estate donations, there's a whole bunch of legalities around that you have to follow through on. So I'm not going to get into all those details now. You can kind of find them out or ask me later, and I'll gladly share them. But yeah, it's a pretty strict rule. In December, so in our giving year, in January we may receive, and this is just typical for all charities, for all fundraising programs. In January, you're going to receive a fraction of all your donations. February, the same. March, it may pick up a little bit if you have some sort of something in one of those months or whatever. But generally speaking, December and November are going to be your peak months for donations. And we're a really small staff of the foundation, but that rule of 48 hours never wavers. We will receive anywhere from, I think last time we received almost 300 donations in a single month, and 48 hours, all of them were sent back, a thank you letter, and the holidays really don't matter. If the mail's going, we're going to get them out. So that's really important. Ethics, I'm not going to talk a lot about ethics because if you need to talk a lot about ethics, then you need to talk a lot about something else. But ethics are everything. I'm pretty fortunate that I'm associated with, horrible word to use, I'm affiliated with the Association of Fundraising Professionals. It's a great association. If you're not a member, I would recommend it. I think membership is like a couple $100 a year. There's a chapter in Erie. There's a chapter in Pittsburgh. They get together however so frequently and talk about they bring in different speakers. There's a nice conference in Pittsburgh that they put on, I think, every April or May, every April. But as a part of that, to be a part of that association, you have to sign your ethical disclaimer. You have to adhere to their standard of ethics, which is pretty awesome. That's like, I think the memberships, I could be way off, but I think I'll just say a bit broader range of 20 to 40,000 international members, and they all adhere to that code of ethics. So that's really important. Oh, I had a question. The last thing that I'll really cover before hopefully you have some questions, and I mentioned it earlier, but the reason why people give is because they're asked. The reason the reason they give to you or they give to your organization is likely because of who asked. So if you are, and I'm not implying to anybody here, but generally speaking, if you are not if you don't appear to be an ethical person, if you appear to be a paid fundraiser, if you are a what are they called?
Televangelist?
No, that wasn't what I was going for. Telemarketing for fundraising. I never hired a company like that, but there's companies who will call you, they'll cold call you, and they'll just ask you for your money. The further away you get from being that personal, connected to the mission, the less likely you are to raise money. So, the Haiti example for me, it was extremely easy for me to raise money for that organization. I came back. I was affiliated with at the time I was working for a school, and I was talking to one of our donors, and talk about, this was a little blurry for me as far as, how this all worked out, but I was talking with another donor for the school at the time, and she was asking how my trip was. She and I had a great relationship. I'd visit with her pretty often, and she was asking about my trip and how it was and how everything is going in Haiti, and I just started telling her. And I'm a really emotional person, and I think that's where I find success in fundraising is that, look, if you wanted me to tell you about this great program, I'm all in for that program. So for me, it just the emotion spills out. And as I'm telling her about this trip to Haiti, I start crying to her, not, like sobbing. I was, still manly, but it just, you start welling up because, at the time I stepped over this lady, this mother who was dying at the doorstep, and her son dragged me into this little hut that they were living in, dragged me into the hut, jumped over his mom, and put me in, kind of like escorted me to the corner, which their whole house was as big as this table. And I was sitting in the corner, and he asked me to bend down because that was how you sit. And I'm sitting there, and I'm asking him about his mother, and he said, "Yeah, she's dying, isn't doing well," and just was so cold about it. It was just it was accepted in that community that this happens. I mean, he was 8, 9 years old. I mean, just a horrible, horrible experience. The next day, I go back and I see him the next day. He's exhausted, different kid, just didn't sleep at all. And I asked somebody else, what happened? Why was he so tired? And they said, well, it rained last night. And I'm like, okay, all right. And I'm thinking maybe it rained in. He says, no, they get tree stumps, set them up inside their house, and they will sit on this tree stump or something because the water will flow through the house. So I'm telling her all these stories, and it's just taking over. I mean, this happened probably, I went to Haiti over a decade ago, and I told this story like the month after I got back, so it was really strong within me. And she's like, that's just amazing. She passed away 3 months later and found out that she had changed her entire will, her entire estate around this organization, which, blew my mind. I mean, she left a sum of money that this little village just completely changed its future forever, and it was just amazing. So that for me was, I wasn't even raising money. I was just talking to her about the cause. And there's other times where I'll go and sit down in front of somebody and I'll ask them, we need this thing because it's really important and it's going to impact 6 people and it's really important. And I'm just this cold-hearted machine who's just there because I volunteered to be on a board or I was placed on the board to help, and it's not going to ever work. It's not going to ever work to just ask for money because you need money. It only works to ask for money if you have a cause if you have this group, this need, whatever it may be, if it's animals, if it's individuals, if it's nature, if it's the arts, whatever it is, you're asking because that mission, that cause needs it, not because you need the money. That's going to become this disconnect of what you're talking about. So, covered quite a bit. Any questions, or do you want me to get into kind of the nuts and bolts?
What do you do when you're like pretty much just tapping their resources?
What do you mean tapping?
Like just exhausting them. Like you said we should start with asking peers that are engaged in the cause. But what about when
Get more peers involved. Yeah. Mission burnout is real. Some of the most important causes that are out there will go by the wayside. The need will still exist, but individuals will get burned out, and their passion won't fade, but their energy, their enthusiasm will, and that's where success really is. So get more involved. I wouldn't necessarily ask for money. I would ask for more people. The more people you have, the more people you can tell about your cause, the more successful you're going to be. Build those circles, get as big as you can. Along the way, start to consider to ask people for money. If I was starting a nonprofit today, I would not ask for a dime for a long time. For as long as I possibly could, I would not ask for money. You can only ask somebody for money once they've got that connection with the cause. You can ask them whenever you want, but if you want to sustain a long-term donor, and that's what all of our goals should be, is to sustain long-term relationships between the individual and the cause. That's where it is by building that rapport, telling them about your mission and why it's so important. I mean, as a fundraiser, I look at myself as kind of the catalyst, the connector between the individual who has this desire. They don't even know it yet, but they want to do something. They may want to sit on their couch. Great. But a lot of people don't want to just sit on their couch. They want to do something. They want to help somebody because it makes them feel good. There may be tax benefits. People give too much credit to the tax benefit side of it, by the way. But they have this philanthropic side of them. And then there's this cause. And we exist in the middle to tell the story to the right people, build that connection. Most times you don't even have to ask, right? If you tell that story correctly, and if you emphasize the need, you most times don't have to ask. Because if this person's right, they're going to give. They'll voluntarily give.
Cool.
Any other questions? So let's build the circles out. We'll take the next step. So for us right now, we don't have the capacity to be in front of every person and ask them for money. We just do not have time in the day to ask thousands of people for money every day or every week, whatever. So we have an annual fund. Once you're done looking up on Google the concentric circles, look at your donor pyramid. It's another important component to every fundraising program. Your donor pyramid is what fundamentally shows the pathway for an individual to become a donor, kind of an annual fund, all the way up to your planned giving, all the way up to your most, somebody gives an estate, somebody gives a major donation. The idea is most donor pyramids are not going to have the base of what they should have. So they're going to start with an annual fund at the bottom, but to me there should be another line below it, another core group below it, which is your prospects, your individuals who are going to grow interested in the organization, who have not yet become donors. So that would be your core, your bottom of your pyramid. Your next step is your annual fund donors. Those are individuals who make a gift once a year, who have an interest, but they aren't making major gifts. They're giving whatever a smaller gift would be for your organization, and that size would depend on the organization and the fundraising size. Have a good one.
Yeah, thank you so much.
After that, we'll make them broad, would be your major giving, or your event giving, or your grants, but we'll remove grants because they're not really part of the individual. So your events, your major giving, and then from there is your estate and planned giving. The idea is that the higher you get, the fewer people you're going to have, but the far more generally speaking, invested they're going to be. So your estate individuals or somebody, your plan giving donors or somebody who really has that tie to the organization to the point where they're writing you into the will. And that's a difficult, for many people, that's a really difficult conversation to get to, but it's the people who have given for a long time and have built that rapport. Your annual fund donors, though, your annual givers, are your most important donors, bar none. Some will say, so large organizations like Allegheny College are going to have major giving officers, people who only ask for major gifts, for major donations, whatever that would be. I don't know what qualifies for at Allegheny College. Maybe it's $50,000, $100,000. I'm not really sure, but that's what the person's job is. So they're kind of in that middle tier of the pyramid. But without your annual donors, you've got nothing, because these are the individuals who support you year in, year out, who are committed to your organization, who will ultimately become your plan giving donors or your major givers. So your annual fund donors are your most important. There's a strategy around those individuals. So for us, because we can't be in front of everybody, we have a direct mail process. Before I get into that, I'll just make a blanket statement that if you're starting an organization, starting a nonprofit, events are not the way to start your fundraising campaign. I don't know what it is in Meadville, but it is like the coolest thing going to have a golf outing. It's the most exhausting thing going, and it's the most laborious? Yeah, whichever way you want to go, way to raise money. Now you think about the tens of hours, the hundreds of hours you're investing in an event. You think about all the time you could have been asking somebody for money. You think about all the time you could have been telling somebody about your mission. You just think about all the long relationships you could have been building with that time. Personally, I don't like events. We have a golf outing. I say that, and then I'll just say we have a golf outing. We've had a golf outing for a while, but we don't. There's some local people who come. It's all of our vendors. It's our vendors from out of state, from away from the area, who come in, they golf. We make a good amount of money. That's why we have a golf outing. If we were asking local people for money, we would not have a golf outing. Our only other event is a stewardship event that I mentioned earlier. So we don't do events. I don't recommend events. If you're conducting an event for awareness, if a fundraising program is conducting an event to build awareness, they're doing the wrong thing. You don't raise awareness by wasting a lot of time planning events, not for fundraising. Now, there are reasons for to build your awareness through events. They are successful for that reason, but not specifically for fundraising. Now, I know somebody's going to be watching and be like, well, Don, we raised $15,000 last year at our event, and I'll give them a high five, and I'll acknowledge that $15,000 can be a big, big chunk of change for a lot of small nonprofits. But I would challenge them to know how they spent all their time, how much time it took for them to raise that money, what they could have been doing as an alternative, who they could have been bringing in, how they could have been building those circles. I mean, the reality is events are easy. I know everybody's going to say, good Lord, if you ever put on an event, they're not easy. They're difficult. They take a lot of time. And that's right. Compared to building the circles, taking your time, creating long-term relationships with individuals who will connect to your mission, the event is easy. Building those relationships, being patient, and talking about your cause and building the excitement about your trip to Haiti, those things take time, and unless you find the perfect person, they require patience, and a lot of times that's difficult. But But just think about how you can invest those hours as an alternative to an event, and I think you'll be more successful. So the annual fund, we will have a direct mail campaign. So if you get a letter from us, it's through our direct mail campaign. I sign every letter. A lot of places will outsource their direct mail campaigns, but essentially, just to give a broad overview of what it is, on a calendar during a year, we'll build our schedule. So we're going to mail a letter on this date, and on this date. We're going to ask this, and between those times, we're going to give updates on what we're doing. We're going to give progress checks, or we're going to remind people how the impact is what impact we're making. We're not just going to ask for money. I will say that we aren't doing the best job at giving the updates as of recent, but you've got to give concrete updates on how the money is being spent, how the impact's being made. But we do all of ours in-house, so we will print all of our letters. I'll write the letters. I'll get them rewritten by somebody who can write better 4 or 5 times. We'll print all of our letters internally. We'll mail them all. In the beginning of the year, that can be thousands. Towards the end of the year, hopefully it's not. But we'll have a set schedule for when we're going to mail them so that we have no excuses why we didn't mail them. That way we're reaching a lot. We're reaching that circle, those people that we've built, we're going to mail letters, we're going to reach a lot more people as opposed to that face-to-face. A perfect example is with the foundation at the Mark. We're conducting an event this summer, but last summer when I joined that board, there was the whole event discussion. We've got to do an event. We've got to build awareness to an event. And I was like, all right, you guys do that. But in the meantime, why don't we just ask people for money? We've got this great cause. The Mark is a great asset. It needs support. It needs the money to maintain that facility, to expand upon its capital improvements. Some of the equipment there is just really old, and I hate to see that asset go away. So we asked each board member to bring in a certain number of individuals who would have a connection to the Mark, who would be interested in the Mark, not just random people, and not people who have money. Like, don't put somebody on your list because they have money. Complete wrong way to go about it. And in fact, most people, if they find out that you ask them to support a cause because they had money, you should just stop asking them again because they're probably going to be turned off for quite a while. People should be in those circles because of their interest in that organization. So we mailed out, I don't know how many letters we mailed out. I mailed out, I think, 12 or so, and every board member mailed out their letters. And we raised, I think, I don't know what the final total was, between $10,000 and $15,000 by asking people via letter, not even face-to-face, for money to support this valuable cause, this valuable mission, this asset in our community, and raise $10,000 to $15,000. Didn't take much time. It did take the overhead cost of those letters, of the actual printing of them, of the mailing of them. But in the span of 3 weeks, we raised that much money, which would have taken that event an additional 2 months and 300 more hours, right? So in the process, so to all the awareness advocates out there, 100 people received a letter about precisely telling them what the need was from a friend of theirs, from a peer of theirs, which instantly adds value to that letter. So in the letter itself, and to get a little specific here, but it's important not to just, so some letters are, there's a whole bunch of science around the letter itself, and I'm not going to get into that much detail, but I'll say this. The letter itself should be upfront, personalized. not a dear friend. Dear friends are extremely impersonal. It should have the address of the person. It should have their name. If you know them personally, cross their last name out, put their first name on it. I like to do that. I don't know that Dear Don is the worst thing in the world, but if you're asking me for money for the first time, you should probably not say Dear Don. You're not going to hurt my feelings. You're going to hurt somebody's feelings, so just play it safe. In the first paragraph, in the very first paragraph of that letter, your reason for writing that letter should be crystal clear. If you're asking for money if you're saying why you're writing that letter on the second page of the letter, well, not many people get to the second page of a letter. So that first paragraph is the most paramount paragraph on that letter. Mm-hmm.
As you thought of the 10 or 12 people you were going to write the letter to, I'm sure it was a very targeted audience based on who would find the message compelling based on the organization, aka if you've got young children, the mark is going to be for
Yeah.
your future.
They've either skated, they've gone through a skate program at the Mark, they went through a swimming program at the Mark, they have children who are going to go through those programs. They themselves recently won a state championship, or state championship, yeah. There's a reason you're asking them. It's not because they have money, right? I mean, that's
So I'm just saying, you're going to choose your friends that you're going to write the letter to based on who is the best recipient
yeah.
to have a positive outcome.
Right. There's a connection, and I know them. So those are the two pretty important things for me. So that paragraph's going to be clear and concise. It's going to tell them what you're writing for. Within the first two paragraphs, you're going to ask for money. It's going to be pretty clear. And you're going to be even more crystal clear that you're asking for money. So many letters I read say, we need this because of this, and that's great. But they don't say, give X amount. Define the amount of money you want them to give. Spell it all out. Don't make it ambiguous at all. It should be an ask. It shouldn't be, you're asking for money, so ask for money. So that needs to be crystal clear. So up front, the paragraph, the opener tells what you're doing. The ask needs to be really quickly thereafter. There should be a tie to how money has been spent in the past, so you comfort them with telling them, look, here's how the impact has been made. I always like to, at one point in the year, say the number. So we have a donor, we have a software that we track all of our donors. I would highly recommend you do that to some extent, even if it's through an Excel. So at one point in the year, one of the letters that we'll mail will have the number of donations that somebody has given and the total amount they've given. Not everybody can do that, but once you build your program, it's pretty easy. If you had the capability of tracking donor histories, especially at a bark park, I would log, if you have a membership or anything like that, I would take down the names of every person's animal, every person's dog. Ours is Rooney. If you wrote me a solicitation...
Why is your dog not at the bark park?
That's a good question. Comfortable making the ask. There you go. So in a solicitation letter to us, I would say, I hope Rooney's been well. I would name the dog. The more personal you can make it, the better. If you know the birthdays of people, mention that. If you know, don't get creepy. Don't get too personal, but make it personal. So the more personal you can make it, the better. The letter is everything. There are good letters and there are bad letters. So also include, just because we're getting a little late here, also include a remittance envelope. So you don't want to just mail the letter with the envelope. You want them to give, so include another envelope for them to mail it back. Have it already addressed. Don't make them think at all. Have a remittance card. or make it onto the envelope so they fill out their information so you can collect their information because you want to keep asking them.
Is it better to have like the donations, like $100, $50?
Yes.
Is it better to send
Yep.
that instead of not sending anything?
Yeah. So take the thought out. If you are extremely confident with somebody, the fewer options you can give them, the better. We have in the past, and it's just a really cumbersome process depending on the cumulative average giving of somebody, or like their spouses, their family. We will personalize letters to ask for an amount based off of that average. Now that's getting far more technical than you need to worry about, but so we're not going to ask them for $50 if their average donation is $1,000. So their average donation, we'll factor that, we'll put a range up and then ask them for $1,000. Generally though, we don't, I don't think I've ever written $1,000 ask in a letter, just because you're getting to the point of awkward. I mean, those you should probably just personally ask somebody for $1,000. If you have that many people that you can't ask them for $1,000, that's a great issue to have. We don't have that issue. We can ask anybody for that, but the more personal, the better, and the fewer options, the better.
Now, I guess she does a lot of taking the dogs to the hospital, to different centers.
Yeah.
And then you gave them free access to the park, right? Now, how would you address that to maybe get them to donate?
I would collect their information. When they come, I would collect their information. I would have them sign up for something, address, email, phone number, whatever it would be. And then I would put all that information together and I'd mail them letters. I would mail them solicitations.
What do you think the total, or the person's total budget, what do you think of your budget you should be spending on fundraising?
Oh, I think you should be spending hundreds of thousands. No, so
I mean,
it all
you have a lot of good ideas, but honestly, to compare what I'm treading water. You know, maybe these guys aren't, but I'm treading water, and sometimes I go under quite often. I mean, I think I'm drowning some days. I mean, I like your ideas, but honestly, to compare what I'm doing and trying to stay alive, and I even have trouble getting. I don't know what you guys are doing, but I have trouble getting $500 even to put together a mailing, to get the stamps, to mail something out.
yeah.
So it's hard. I mean, I like your ideas, but Don, not to criticize, because you've had some great ideas, and I've started taking some notes on it. But my God, I mean, my problems are so unlike what you're talking about, because you know the deal with mine is you can make money if you have money. You can go to the lottery and you can spend a lot of money on the lottery to try and get more money if you have the money to spend on the lottery. Well, if you don't have the money to spend on the lottery, you can't play the lottery to make more money. So my point is, it's really hard to even get to stage 1. I mean, you're at stage 5,000 to me. I'm back here at stage 10, trying to just stay alive. And I don't know whether you guys have the same problem or not. Maybe you guys have lots of money coming in, and maybe you've got a huge budget. But it's hard to.
Oh, I completely agree.
You're saying when my budget is so minimal.
I completely agree. Do you have donation boxes at the Bark Park?
No, I don't, and that's probably a good idea.
So you have users going through it all the time. Donation boxes at the Bark Park. Do you have solicitations at the Bark Park?
So, what?
Appeals?
I know you said.
Appeals, signage that would say, it would be an appeal, asking for donations.
Yeah. Well, I've done a lot of these ideas. I mean, and I have done some of these. And,
Yeah.
and some of them
We
work.
sent out letters and letters and letters.
Yeah, so
Not personalized, and I like that.
they have to be personalized, they have to be direct, they have to be people who are already stakeholders. If they're not already stakeholders, they need to become stakeholders in any way. If you have your board, if they're asking people for money, yes, the letters can be expensive. We mailed 100 letters, and it cost us not that much money, a few $100, I think. So we raised the money to mail the letters.
Have you ever seen anyone ever do anything, and I can think back when I was a teacher and things like that, the old theory of the coffee pushers. Get get you to say to you, hey, Don, why don't you get about 6 people together and let's get on Station 3 tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And let's talk about what the Bark Park can do and how it can do it.
Yeah.
And do that type of thing. And then hopefully once you can grab in 4 out of the 6 people you brought, then try it again. And I sometimes
Absolutely.
do better with the smaller amounts in places like that. I did that one time.
Absolutely.
Where I used to have people come in just for wine or cheese or just small hors d'oeuvres and just have people come in and say, hey, here's what we're doing. But I like the idea of the personal stories too.
Absolutely. So if you can't afford the letters, and if the people don't want to give the list of names, whatever, ask them to have a gathering. We frequently will ask our board members to host an event. We have a great board member right now who's looking at hosting an event to thank donors and get them more involved, get them more engaged. There's no reason that can't happen at the beginning before you ask. And like I said, asking out of the gate is going to be generally unsuccessful. Unless that person really has connection to the organization, they're not going to give. So they have to have that rapport. They have to have the understanding of what the mission is to make them give. I wish there was a way that people just generally gave to start up nonprofits, but it's just a difficult process. There isn't a magic wand, unfortunately. Any questions? Any other questions?
This is backtracking a little bit. So events are bad, and you don't recommend asking right out of the gate.
Right.
But then there's a chunk of time when you're operating, doing programming, whatever, and how do you fund it? If you don't ask them right away.
Yeah, I mean, that's a challenge, right? I mean, you've got this issue where there's a group, there's a need. Generally, though, to start a nonprofit, you've got to have some sort of inner circle. If you wake up one day and say, you know what, I want to get more art in our community. And if you wake up and decide that, okay, great. Now, how do I get more art in the community? How do I improve access to art in our community? Well, the first thing you're not going to do is ask for money. People just don't get it. Okay, unless you know of somebody who's got an interest in art, then you immediately have that connection. But it's just, you've got to build your case, why you're doing it, get the people involved. The biggest risk you run is if you do ask for money immediately is that you're going to turn them off and not make them a long-term donor. It's not, if starting a nonprofit was easy, we have so many nonprofits right now in our country, it's incredible. But yeah, it's a nonprofit. It's difficult to start.
I've had a thing recently, and it's been somewhat successful, but I made a deal where if people gave me money, I gave them something in exchange.
Mm-hmm.
And what I gave them, like if someone gave me $3,000, and I just recently raised like $15,000 in no time. But the deal was that I would therefore let you use the kennel services. I told them the price was going to eventually go up for the kennel. So if they gave me money now, it gave me $3,000, I would continue using the basic price, and I would not increase the price. So as they use it, and nobody's going to, I think 6 people did it. They're not all going to come in on the same day and use the money for the deal I gave them.
Right.
So I got $3,000 I took for 5 people, $15,000 real fast. But then so I had money to keep myself alive. And then I said to them, well, every time you come to the dog park, and I don't care if it takes you 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years, you can continue always coming at the previous rate, and then we'll just keep on marking up that $3,000. So I've done things like that.
Absolutely.
It's a nothing thing though, because you have to watch when they're going to use it.
Yeah.
Because
So
if they're all using them one time, and really.
a couple things about that. Corporate sponsors.
Why it doesn't work.
What's that?
We're coming with what the downside is.
There's not as much. I wouldn't worry about the downside of that, but there's a couple things to be cognizant of. that generally will work for corporate sponsors. So if you're looking for corporate sponsors, that's always a great way to go. However, you are providing a service. So that's not a donation in full. And when you acknowledge that to the person, you need to define that for them because they can't write off
Right.
$3,000.
And they didn't.
Yeah,
That's a
so
little bit differently.
for corporates, I mean, I only talked about individuals. Corporations, businesses, they want bang for their buck. We've created different programs throughout time, different places I've worked that build exposure. We quantified the number of people we were reaching, and then we asked for sponsorships for that. If you ask me to sponsor a golf outing, I'm going to do it because I support your cause, not because of all the great things you're telling me I'm going to get in response. Being listed in a program, that's not valuable. I'm not getting that much exposure. I'm going to support it because it's a great cause. However, if you do have, like our website at the hospital has 50,000 hits a month. If I wanted to, we could get advertisement on our website because of the volume of visits that we have. So if you have people coming through the Bark Park every year, and you can quantify the number of people that you have coming through that Bark Park, then you could have a corporate sponsor. Say, look, I have X thousand, X hundred of people coming through every year. Will you sponsor? And I'll put your name when you enter. Donor recognition is always big. Naming rights are really important. People like that exposure. They like to see their family name all over the place. Sell naming rights.
You mean like just say construction, buy a brick, and put your family's name on it.
So I hate to say it, I've not been to the Bark Park. I'm going to come to the Bark Park, but I'm sure, I will. I'm like embarrassed to say it,
And
but
I think your boss, or one of the people, comes out there all the time.
I'm sure.
And what's about the person who's one of the people in the foundation? I can't remember.
Annette Gulick, yeah.
She's there all the time.
Yeah.
She's always asking me for donations.
Yeah.
For baskets for your events. So see, I know where to find you.
Great, yeah. So I'm sure you've got areas at the Bark Park that you can sell naming rights to.
Yeah.
Bricks and things do work. They're just much smaller. If you can sell a certain area, a trail for $5,000, $2,000, name it, make a nice sign, you spend $100 on $200 on a sign. Then there's the Autumn Bogle walking trail.
Yeah.
One day. I've gone past 6:30, but I don't want to. Any other questions?
I'm just going to ask about digital media. Do you do a lot of thinking from your perspective? You can write personal letters by email to people, and you can cut and paste in pictures. Is that a way that people are more responsive to getting messages on their phone rather than the old-fashioned mail?
Yes. So people do give through digital campaigns. They do give through social media. I've never been successful at it. I'll just say that. So I can't really. There's people who have been successful at it, highly successful at it. If you look at like Charity Water, unbelievably successful at it. The people sell their birthdays for the organization. They all make their donations online. It's great. I will say that there has to be a way to accept the donation in the same mode that you've asked for it. So if you ask for it via letter, there should be an envelope that they can mail it back. If you ask for it via phone, website, social media, you have to have easy capabilities to receive it through the internet, through your website. Don't make people print off forms. Don't make people, don't mail them a letter and ask them to go to this website. That you're assuming.
Stick to one like PayPal. Just stick to one easy.
Yeah, whatever the easiest, whatever the user-friendly program is that you use. Yeah.
The MS Facebook challenge that just went viral, right?
If you can create a viral campaign, let me know how you did it. They raised an incredible amount of money by people dumping ice on their heads. So, anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure.